This is the Chefpreneur podcast, where we inspire professional cooks to take on greater risk to build a personal chef business for themselves. Now, here's your host, Andres Hinojosa.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chefpreneur podcast. I am your host, Andres Hinojosa. Thank you so much again for tuning in this week. As always, we like to start our podcast with a question from all of you. And this week's question comes from Faye Charles. Actually, she sent us an email through podcast at chefpreneurprogram.com to ask this question. Her question says, "My problem lies with the fact I live in the Caribbean and there isn't an insurance company that is willing to insure my company, and I wanted to make my company an LLC, but it costs $1,500 US to do this, and she doesn't have that kind of money right now," she says. And she asked, should I register my business as a sole proprietor without insurance? And then when I start to make some money, I can change it to an LLC. Now, this is a great question, Faye. And there is a couple kind of areas, and I don't want to say gray areas, but obviously you're going to try to pick the lesser of two evils, right? The first and foremost situation that you find yourself in is, like you said, it's not really the money, but the fact that there's no insurance companies to insure your business. In a case like that, it is best to have an LLC because there is limited liability, which means if they come after you or try to sue you, a client, which I hope they wouldn't, but if they did, you having an LLC will give you a level of liability or limited liability to your personal assets. Now, if you don't have a lot of personal assets, I would highly suggest just kind of going with a sole proprietorship and try to still dig and find an insurance company that will insure your business. Now, that's the real truth of it is. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because obviously the insurance is there to protect you. An LLC would do the same. But I think I agree with what you're trying to ask, which is I would, go as a sole proprietor without insurance. Try to make a couple sales, get your first couple events underneath your belt, and then opt in to purchase the LLC for $1,500, especially because there's no insurance providers that will insure your company. This will at least give you the safest bet. Now, if you don't feel comfortable cooking for anybody without your LLC, because that is going to kind of be your I guess you would say your coverage or kind of, limiting the risk of someone actually coming after your personal assets, I would suggest if you're already working a current job, saving enough money to then just do the $1,500 LLC right out the gate. So then you feel peace of mind and you're not being a sole proprietor and then working into an LLC. So I hope that answers your question, Faye. Thank you so much. Hey, if you guys have any questions, you can send us your questions. We love to hear from you. You can send them directly to podcast@chefpreneurprogram.com, or you can ask your questions in our free Facebook group titled the Chefpreneur Movement Facebook group. If you have a question, go ahead and post it in that group as well. We'd love to answer it here on this podcast. Now, without further ado, I want to jump right into today's topic, which is titled, "Why Are You Charging So Little for Your Services?" Now, this has been on my mind for quite a while, and I wanted to create a podcast because I think so many of us, I could tell you a few reasons, which we'll get to in a minute, of why you're charging so little for your services. But realistically, I want to kind of also give you another take and another angle on this. And I want you to see a different side of why you should charge more for your services, just other than the fact that you're worth it and so forth and so on. So let's start with confidence. A lot of chefs and cooks I talk to, for some reason, they're very confident in your skills. They're very confident in their ability to cook or possibly give a decent experience to a client, but then they undersell themselves, they cut themselves short, and they charge very little for their personal chef services. Now, like anything, you are going to have to take a step out and you are going to have to be put yourself in an uncomfortable position, I would say, of starting to charge a little bit more money. But I'm also going to give you another angle and how to look at this to maybe hopefully get you over those confidence barriers and a little bit of the fear that you have with it, okay? So many of even my program students struggle with this, and it's completely natural. When you first start out your business, you're going to undersell yourself. You just will. That's human nature. You're not understanding the level of experience or the level of value that you're giving your client. And so that's part of it, is you have to understand the level of value you're providing for your clients. But also, there's another way to look at it. If you start to charge more money for your services, it brings your standards up higher. Let me kind of explain this a little bit. I've had a couple Chefpreneur program students that have told me, Chef, you know what? I'm not really all in it for the money. I don't necessarily need to make tons of money. It's not about, per se the money. I'm not looking to, be a millionaire with my personal chef business. Obviously, you need money to survive. You need money to pay your bills. Money makes a lot of the world go around, right? But at the same time, I understand what they're saying. They're saying, hey, I don't need all this money. I don't need gobs of money. I'm just looking to deliver a great experience for my clients. Well, let me just give you a few facts and a few points. That's probably a way and an angle that you've never heard this before. Okay, for instance, if you start charging more money for your services, number one, it's going to help you get over your confidence issues and saying, am I really delivering an experience that's worth this amount of money? Now, it's really hard sometimes for us on our end to see the value that we're giving our clients. But for the most part, clients are looking for an experience. They're looking for someone to come in, give them an amazing experience. And we've talked about it plenty of times in this podcast of why the value of personal chef services is absolutely so high. Right? Most clients are not just looking at your food. I've said it before, 30% of the entire experience is probably the food, maybe even 25%. And again, some of you guys may argue with me on that, but I take it from someone who knows firsthand, 70% of the experience is everything else, right? The way that you make them feel, the comfort that you give them, everything even from cleaning up and washing the dishes brings a lot of value to the client. But let me spin it a little bit more, okay? When you start charging more for your personal chef services, the client is actually going to value the service more, okay? Number one. So write that down. The client is going to value the service more when you charge more money. Now, on the flip side, no matter if you're technically saying, hey, chef, I want to make tons of money, I'm doing this for the money, even if you're not doing it for the money, on your end, you're going to produce and you're going to perform at a higher level because the client is paying more money, okay? Let me just give you a simple story. I recently had the pleasure of cooking for an NFL player. Now, I won't disclose his name because just due to privacy, but when I was talking to this NFL player, as I was kind of prepping and cooking, he was just, very, very nice guy. And we were talking and I was saying, you know what, when was it real for you that you were going to play in the NFL from college, right? During the draft, he says, was an exciting time, but it was also very nerve-wracking, right? And he wasn't a first-round draft pick. I think he was even not even a third-round draft pick. But here's the thing. He was telling me the whole entire story in the process that he was really excited to finally play in the NFL. He was excited to get the opportunity. It was his dream ever since he was a young boy to be in the NFL. And here his dreams are coming true. And he said, honestly, chef, one of the things that I realized of when it became real to me is when I got signed on to my first team, and they were going to pay me a salary of over $400,000 a year to play football. Now, we all know that there's football players out there making millions of dollars, okay? But at the same time, almost $500,000 a year to play a sport is still a lot of money, okay? Now, again, relating that to some of the NFL players that are out there, right? The Tom Brady's of the world and so forth and so on, $400,000 and some $1,000 a year doesn't seem like a lot of money, right? But let's be truthful. $500,000 or close to $500,000 a year is a lot of money to anybody, okay? $100,000 a year is pretty good money. So when he started telling me the story, he says, it became real to me. I signed the contract and I went home and I was like, what did I just do? I now have to play football where someone is going to pay me thousands of dollars to actually play this game. Now, here's the thing. What's insane about this is that as he started to play and he got signed on for over $400,000 a year, it was insane to me that basically he was saying, I am now going to have to perform to that level of playing $400,000 a year. But here's what happened with him. He started realizing that because he was going to play football now for almost $500,000 a year, that he had to start performing at a level that he hasn't performed ever before in his life. He told me he started training harder. He started pushing himself more because he was thinking in his mind, I have to actually perform. And here's the thing. He says, I've gotten the best stats in the NFL as opposed to my college career where he actually had obviously good stats, because if he didn't have good stats in college, he would have never made it to the NFL. But he was telling me, Chef, I had to perform at that level now, and it forced me and it pushed me to train harder. It forced me and pushed me to play better. I had to dig deep and I had to make sure that I played at the level I was supposed to play at for that kind of money and the expectation that the team had on him. So it got me thinking, as he said this, it got me thinking that many of us in this business as personal chefs, we sit here and we undercharge for our services. Now, again, there's reasons that we shouldn't undercharge. Number one, our services are extremely valuable. And again, I teach in my program. In fact, my average program students are earning $500 to $600 every cook day. I mean, it's good money and relates to what the average salary of a chef is, which is just barely over $33,000 a year, which is pitiful for the amount of hours and work that we do, but it's the truth. But it started to get me thinking, listen, because you undercharge, you're probably not benefiting your client as well, because the effort that you're going to put into it is going to be far less than if there's a higher expectation on you, right? So think about it this way. If you charge someone $200 to go cook for 10 people, which is very, very low. And for many of you that are listening to this podcast right now, you might be saying, well, that's what I charge, or I've charged that before, or, I want you to start to really understand where I'm coming from when I tell you this, that you're not doing the client the best service possible. Because when you charge $200 and you undersell yourself and you basically cut yourself short, you're also cutting the client short because you're allowing the expectation level to come down. In fact, sometimes and I know I'm speaking to somebody here, and I know you're going to relate because I was in that position as well, where you actually undersell yourself, you undercharge for your services, then the client starts to become nitpicky, which obviously, no offense, it happens more. Usually the cheaper you charge for your services, the more demanding the client is, and the more, complaints you have, and they want all this other little stuff that doesn't even make sense. And they kind of become the client from hell, to be honest with you, right? So here's the deal. A lot of times when you undercharge for your services, it starts to happen that the client starts to be more demanding. And here's what happens. You're sitting there, you're serving them. Next thing you know, you're kind of upset at yourself because you're like, man, I really undercharged this time. Like, how come I charged so little for my services? And you start to say, well, they only paid $200. So like, what can they expect? And what happens is you start to allow your standards to slip because you're upset. You're kind of, subconsciously or even consciously, you're bitter about it. And you're feeling like, man, well, they're going to get what they paid for. They're going to get what they paid for. And although that is a true statement, which is the reason why I'm making this podcast today, you don't want it to be that way. Because here's the thing. And I've said this before on my podcast, the podcast episode before as well. You also don't want other people at that function or at that event. Let's say you're cooking for a group of 15 people. You charge them $300. You're making hardly any money. You're a little bit bitter. They're very demanding. Next thing you know, there's 14 other people in the event that didn't hire you. They don't know how much the host is paying you. And they're seeing the not so good service that you're doing, which spreads faster than the good service that you're doing, right? So that's unfortunately the truth. then you put yourself into a repetitive cycle. So you start charging little because you're trying to just get the sale. The client ends up being more demanding. You start getting a little bitter. You start getting a little upset. You're like, my gosh, this is like the client from hell. Why did I do this? Like, why did I sign up for this? I know I charged too little, but then you do it all over again to try to get that sale. And then you fall into that trap again. Then the people at that event or the people that are surrounded, the host that that are at the party that you're cooking for, they start to realize, well, man, this chef doesn't really have everything going on. The service is kind of poor. The food is not the greatest quality, right? Because then all of a sudden you're charging a little amount of for your services. The client probably wants cheapo ingredients because they want to try to save every nickel and dime. And so the guests of theirs are tasting all this stuff and they're not even happy about it as well. And now you have 15 people that are seeing you perform subpar service as opposed to just the host. If it was just the host, it'd be a lot better, but it's not. It's going to be the rest of the people at the event. And I've been in those circumstances where I've been super annoyed by the client. And also I felt like, man, why did I say yes to this? And honestly, whose fault is it? Mine, yours. This is why you can't undersell yourself. This is why you can't charge so little for your services. You're not doing, most importantly, the client any good. Simultaneously, you're not doing yourself any good because the client is going to have higher expectations when you charge more money. At the same time, you'll say, oh my gosh, this person's paying me $1,000 to cook for 10 people. I got to perform. I got to show up on time. I got to use the best of the best ingredients. I got to feel like I'm not, you're not going to feel stuck that you're getting, that you're just trying to squeeze out, because it's an 8-hour day that you're performing these services. $200 divided by 8 is not a lot of money. So you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, I'm not earning anything per hour. It's a lot of work for what I'm doing. But when you charge more money, you're going to show up with a game face on. You're going to start, just like the NFL player I was talking about, you're going to start training better. You're going to show up on time. You're going to be performing at your highest level. You're going to buy the best ingredients. You're going to be prepared. You're going to be maybe pacing the floor back and forth at your home saying, oh my gosh, somebody's paying me $1,000 to go cook for them. Like, this is real. This is going to happen. Like, I got to perform. What if I got, you're going to pay attention when you're cooking the salmon. You're going to pay attention when you're cooking the steak to make sure it comes out absolutely flawless and perfect every single time. You will pay more attention. You will hustle more. You will be better than if you were going to undercharge your client. And who benefits the most out of all this? Like I've said before, the client always comes first. The client will benefit the most because they will experience you giving 110% as opposed to you giving 50% because you undercharged and now you're bitter. So really, this is the other angle that none of us really think about. We think about are just underselling ourselves and undercharging as being a problem for us. But it really translates into a problem for the client. Lately, I've actually charged quite a bit of money, for my personal chef services for some clients. In fact, this coming Thanksgiving, I have a client who's going to pay me $10,500 for 3 days. And it's just dinner only for 15 people. Now think about this. These are actually outside of the scope, but because it's Thanksgiving Day, there's a lot of different things. She actually wants a very large menu and it's going to take a lot of effort. I'm going to have to bring more staff. Now, when I presented the price to her, she didn't blink an eye. But now I'm going to be paid $10,500 to perform services for 3 dinners, just for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night, just 3 dinners for 15 people each night for her family. I have to perform. That means my team has to be on their A game. I have to be on my A game. I have to bring the best quality ingredients and I have to make sure I show up and perform. Now, here's the deal. Who benefits out of that? She does. The family does the most. Now, I benefit about it as well because my pocketbook's not going to be looking too bad after that week. But at the same time, more importantly, again, the client will benefit from this. So you just look at it sometimes that you're charging little, you think you're giving the client a deal, but you're not because you're not able to give them the best. Think about the expectation level if you go buy a car on Craigslist for $500 or if you go buy a brand new Rolls Royce at $300,000. The expectation of when you see that Rolls Royce, if you see one scratch on the back of the trunk or whatever, you're going to have an expectation that Rolls Royce, it will literally repaint that thing and make it perfect. You just dropped $300,000. But on a $500 car, You're lucky if maybe the headboard is not falling off, right? The thing's probably rusted in areas, if the engine runs, but the oil light and the gas light or the engine light and the oil light is on, you're not going to complain too much. If it's a $500 car, the expectation level comes down. So what do you want to be in your business? The Rolls Royce, or do you want to be the $500 beater that you buy on Craigslist? And it's all for the benefit of the client, not just the benefit for you. I hope this podcast resonated with somebody. I hope it made sense. I hope that it allowed you to understand that beyond the confidence level, when you charge more, you will perform better. It will make you better, and the client will actually be happier. Hey, you know what? Here on the Chefpreneur podcast, we are always trying to motivate, educate, and inspire as many chefs and cooks to take a stand for their personal freedom by breaking the chains of a kitchen job and building their own empire. We truly believe that the future is yours and you can put it into your own hands. Hey, I want to just give you guys an opportunity to download our free ebook. This is the ultimate guide for starting a personal chef business. If you go to becomeachefpreneur.com, fill out some information, your name and your email address, and we'll send it right over to you. That's becomeachefpreneur.com. That's becomeachefpreneur.com. Download the free ebook today. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube, type in Chefpreneur, Chef, Preneur, you'll see our channel. Subscribe to it so that you can always get these podcasts. If you're listening to on YouTube, if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, Google Play Music, on iHeartRadio, wherever you're doing it, iTunes, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well so that you're always up to date when a new podcast comes out. Also, like I mentioned before, join us in our free Facebook group. If you go to Facebook, type in the Chefpreneur Movement Facebook group. You'll see it. It's 100% free to join. We'll ask you a few questions just to join the group. But once you get in the group, you'll see other like-minded chefs and cooks that are wanting to start their own business or already have their own business, and you can get a ton of knowledge from them. Again, thank you so much again for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. Again, my name is Andres Hinojosa. I can't wait to see you guys or talk to you guys next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Chefpreneur podcast, where we want to educate, motivate, and inspire as many chefs to become their own boss. Please subscribe to the podcast and join us every week to be part of the movement. To sign up for our free online web class, visit thechefpreneurwebinar.com.